They say patience is the purest form of love. And for years, he proved it. He waited for her, defended her, and never stopped believing she would one day be his. But the day she said "I do," she was looking at his best friend. What happened after that moment shocked everyone who witnessed.
She was still wearing his old university hoodie the day they carried her out of that tiny apartment. Not because she was cold, not because she had forgotten to change, but because that hoodie was all she had left of him. The neighbors said she had been smiling just a few weeks before, humming to herself in the mornings, cooking jollof rice on Sundays, telling anyone who would listen that her man was going to make it, that one day everything would be worth it. But that day never came. Not for her. Because the man she had sacrificed everything for, the man she had fed with her own hands, paid school fees for with money she didn't have, the man she had loved with a loyalty most people only read about in old books, had walked away the moment his name appeared on the graduation list. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. And yet, this story does not end in sorrow. Because what happened to him after that, what life had quietly been preparing while he was busy celebrating himself, was something no one in that community could have predicted. Stay with me, because this story is about to change the way you see loyalty, sacrifice, and the quiet patience of karma. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Her name was Adiz. She was 22 years old when she met Emeka at the corner of a dusty market road in a mid-sized Nigerian town. He was carrying a stack of second-hand textbooks under one arm and a look of quiet determination on his face, the kind of look that makes a certain type of woman stop walking. Adiz was that type of woman. She had grown up watching her mother sacrifice for others without complaint. Her mother had worked double shifts at a textile shop, skipped meals, and sewed clothes by candlelight, all to give her children a better chance. And so Adiz had inherited that language. The language of giving. The language of staying. Emeka was brilliant. Everyone agreed on that. He could quote textbooks from memory, solve problems that made his professors pause, and speak about the future with a fire that made you believe anything was possible. But he was poor. His father had died when he was 14, leaving his mother to raise 4 children on a teacher's salary that arrived late more months than it arrived on time. Emeka had scraped through secondary school on scholarships and stubbornness. Now, he had been accepted to study engineering at the university, but the acceptance letter in his pocket felt more like a taunt than a triumph. He had no money for tuition, no money for books, no money for even the most basic accommodation. And that was when Adiz made a decision that would define the next 4 years of her life. "I'll help you," she told him one evening, 3 months after they started spending time together. Emeka looked at her. "Ada, you don't have to do that." "I know I don't have to," she said. "I want to. You're going to be great one day, Emeka. I can feel it. And I want to be part of getting you there." He held her hands and told her she was the most beautiful soul he had ever encountered. He told her he would never forget what she was doing for him. He told her that one day soon, he would give her the world. She believed every word. And so it began. Adiz took on extra shifts at the salon where she worked as a hairdresser. She cut corners on her own meals, wore the same 4 dresses in rotation, and sent whatever she could save to Emeka at university. She covered his registration fees in the first year, his hostel fees in the second, his project materials in the third. She hawked food on weekends at local events, rice and stew in takeaway containers, not for herself but for him. When he called from school sounding tired and discouraged, she was the one who talked him back from the edge. "I'm thinking of dropping out," he told her once, during his second year. "The coursework is overwhelming and I feel like I'm behind everyone else." "You are not dropping out," Adiz said firmly. Not harshly, but with the quiet authority of a woman who has made up her mind. "Ada, Emeka, listen to me. I did not sell my gold earrings, the ones my grandmother gave me, for you to come home and give up in your second year. You are going to finish that course. You are going to graduate, and you are going to make us both proud. Do you hear me?" There was a long silence on the phone. Then he said softly, "Yes, Ada, I hear you," and he stayed. People in their community watched Adiz and shook their heads. Not in disrespect, but in a kind of helpless admiration. Her friend Chioma sat with her one Sunday afternoon and said, "Ada, you are doing too much for this man. What if he leaves when he gets his degree?" Adiz laughed. Not nervously. Genuinely. Emeka is not that kind of man, she said. You don't know him like I do. He has a good heart. Chioma said nothing more. But she filed the conversation away. The way people always file away warnings they hope never come true. It was during Emeka's final year that something shifted. The calls became less frequent. When they did speak, he sounded distracted, distant, like a man whose mind was already somewhere else, in a life Adiz was not quite part of. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But she told herself it was the pressure of final exams, project submissions, the weight of becoming. He's just stressed, she told Chioma. He'll be fine once he graduates. And then what? Chioma asked. He gets a job, starts earning, and suddenly Ada, who supported him through everything, is just background? Stop being dramatic. But Chioma wasn't being dramatic. Because in those final months of Emeka's program, something had been quietly happening. Something Adiz had no way of knowing about, 300 kilometers away, running herself thin to keep a man afloat. There was a girl at the university. Her name was Temi. She came from money, the kind of money that announces itself without trying. Her father owned a construction firm. She drove a car on campus. She wore perfume that lingered in corridors for minutes after she passed through them. And she had noticed Emeka. Not the struggling Emeka who had arrived 4 years ago with worn-out sneakers and hunger in his eyes, but the new Emeka, confident, almost graduated, speaking about the future like a man who had already arrived. They became close, first over study sessions, then over dinners that Temi paid for without making it a thing, then over long evening walks around campus. When Emeka told himself he was just enjoying the company of a friend, he told himself a lot of things. He told himself that what he had with Adiz was real, but that he and Temi were just friends. He told himself that using Temi's connections to secure a job interview wasn't betrayal. It was just smart networking. He told himself that he would sort everything out after graduation. But the truth that was already written in the atmosphere long before anyone said it out loud, was that Emeka had made his choice. And Adiz was not in it. Graduation day arrived like thunder on a clear morning. Adiz had saved up for a bus ticket to attend. She had bought a new blouse, her first new clothing in 18 months. She had her hair done the night before, staying up past midnight to look right for the man whose success she had quietly built. She arrived at the university gates glowing. She found Emeka in the crowd after the ceremony. He was surrounded by coursemates, laughing, holding his certificate up for photographs. Then she saw the girl beside him, standing too close, touching his arm in that comfortable, familiar way that belongs only to people who have shared something private. Adiz stopped walking. Emeka looked up. Their eyes met. And for just a moment, just one terrible, clarifying moment, she saw it. Not guilt exactly. Something worse. Discomfort. Like she was a reminder of something he no longer wanted to remember. Ada, he said, breaking away from the group and walking toward her. You came. Of course I came, she said, smiling carefully. I wasn't going to miss this. They hugged, but it felt like hugging a stranger who was using a body she once knew. That night, he told her they needed to talk. 3 days later, back home, he called her. And the words that came through the phone that evening were the kind that don't just end a relationship. They end a chapter of a person's life. Ada, I think we've grown apart. I've changed. You've changed. I don't think we're right for each other anymore. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Not on the phone, not while he could hear. She only said, very quietly, "Is there someone else?" And the silence that followed was the loudest answer she had ever received. If you're still watching up to now, type "I'm still here" in the comment section. The weeks after that phone call were the darkest of Adiz's life. She stopped eating properly. She went through the motions at the salon, washing hair, braiding, smiling at customers, while something inside her sat very still and very cold. She had given him 4 years. 4 years of her youth, her savings, her gold earrings, her grandmother's memory. And now she had a phone that no longer rang with his voice, a heart full of questions that had no answers, and a hoodie he had left behind during his last visit. The one she couldn't bring herself to throw away. Chioma held her on many of those nights. Cry, she would say. Cry it all out, Ada. And then we're going to figure out what comes next. What came next was slow, painfully slow, but it came. Adiz had always been good with her hands and even better with numbers. Between clients at the salon, she had been quietly watching tutorial videos on her phone, business management, bookkeeping, how to register a small enterprise. She had no grand plan, just a quiet stubbornness that refused to let her story end with someone else's betrayal. 6 months after the breakup, she registered a small business, a catering service, run out of her mother's kitchen, that she named Ada's Table. The first few months were hard. Orders were small. Some clients paid late. Some didn't pay at all. But Adiz had spent 4 years learning how to make something from nothing. She knew how to stretch resources. She knew how to work when she was exhausted. She knew how to keep going when giving up would have been so much easier. By the end of her first year, Ada's Table had a small but devoted following. Corporate lunch orders, birthday catering, a contract with a local school that brought in steady, predictable income. She moved out of her mother's house, got her own apartment, small but hers. She sat in it one evening and looked around at the space, the little curtains she had picked herself, the second-hand couch she had cleaned and recovered with a fabric she liked, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Peace. Not happiness, exactly. Not yet, but peace. Meanwhile, in another city entirely, Emeka had started his new life. He had landed the job through Temi's father's connections, a well-paying engineering position with a reputable firm. He and Temi were together officially now. They moved in together 6 months after graduation. Photos on social media showed a life that looked polished and complete. And Emeka, for a while, told himself he had made the right choice. He rarely thought of Adiz, or at least that is what he told himself. Sometimes, late at night, a sound or a smell would pull at something buried in him. The memory of a voice talking him out of dropping out. The image of a woman in a market blouse pressing a crumpled envelope of money into his hands because she believed in him more than he believed in himself. But he had learned to push those thoughts down. Guilt, after all, is inconvenient when you are trying to move forward. It started with small cracks. The first was professional. 2 years into his job, the firm Emeka worked for lost a major government contract, the very contract that had justified hiring him. Quietly, without announcement, positions were reviewed. His was one of them. He found himself with a termination letter and 3 months severance in an economy that was not generous to the unemployed. He went to Temi's father for help. And this is where things began to unravel in ways Emeka had never imagined. Temi's father had always been polite to Emeka, courteous, friendly even. But there was a difference Emeka was beginning to understand between being welcomed as a guest and being considered family. When Emeka arrived at the man's office with his resume and his carefully rehearsed pitch about his skills and experience, Temi's father listened with the patient smile of someone who has already made a decision. "Emeka, you are a fine young man," he said, folding his hands on the desk. "But what I need right now are people with senior-level experience. You are still early in your career. I think it's better you build that experience elsewhere. Sir, with respect, Temi and I are serious about our relationship." "I thought. My daughter's relationship choices are hers to make," the man said, with a warmth that somehow made the dismissal feel even colder. "My business decisions are mine." Emeka walked out of that office and stood on the pavement outside for a long time. He thought about calling Temi. Then he thought about what he would say. And he realized, standing there in the afternoon sun, that without her father's support, Temi's interest in him had already been quietly cooling. 2 months later, she ended things. Not cruelly, not with anger. She said, with the precise, rehearsed calm of someone who had planned the conversation, that they had been growing in different directions, and that she needed a partner who was more settled. The irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. Here was the exact sentence, almost word for word, that Emeka had used on Adiz 3 years earlier. And now it was his turn to stand on the receiving end and understand what it actually felt like. He moved into a cheaper apartment, started applying for jobs, interview after interview. Some went nowhere. Some ended in rejections that arrived without explanation. The city that had felt full of possibility 18 months ago now felt enormous and indifferent. He called his mother one night, more vulnerable than he had been since he was a child. "Mama, I've made mistakes," he said. His mother, being the kind of woman who had survived too much to waste time pretending, said, "I know. I treated someone badly, someone who helped me when I had nothing, and I don't know how to live with that." "Then stop trying to live with it," his mother said, "and start trying to fix it." He stared at the ceiling of his small apartment for a long time after that call ended. And somewhere across that same country, Adi's table was about to receive its biggest catering contract yet. Hit the like button
Look at
right
the
now
sparks
if this story
dance.
is
They're
hitting
like
close
tiny
to home.
stars, aren't they?
And if you haven't
The
subscribed
night
yet,
feels so alive.
do it now. You don't
Tiny
want to miss
stars,
what
aren't
happens
they?
next.
The night
It was a
feels so alive.
conference, an annual business summit for small enterprise owners in the region, the kind of event that Adiz had, for the first 2 years of building her business, told herself was for people further along than her. This year, Chioma had signed her up without asking. "You're going," Chioma said. "I've already paid the registration. Don't argue with me." Adiz had laughed and gone. At the summit, she was introduced to a panel of investors looking to fund promising small businesses in the food and hospitality sector. She had prepared a short presentation, nothing fancy, just honest numbers and a clear story about how Ada's table had grown. She stood up and spoke with the quiet authority of a woman who had built something real from nothing. By the end of the day, she had 2 serious offers. Within a year, Ada's table had expanded into a proper catering company with a small team, a commercial kitchen, and contracts across 3 cities. Adiz did not celebrate loudly. She never had been that kind of person. But on the evening she signed the lease for her first commercial kitchen space. She sat alone in the empty room. Concrete floor, high ceiling, the smell of fresh paint, and she cried. Not from sadness. From the strange, overwhelming feeling of becoming someone you once only hoped you could be. It was around this time that Emeka found her. Not in person. Not at first. He had seen a feature article about Ada's table in a regional business publication. A small piece, but the photograph beside it was unmistakable. Adiz, in a clean white chef's coat, standing in front of a commercial kitchen, smiling the particular smile of a person who has survived something and come out the other side. He sat with that article for a long time. Then he picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He called Chioma, whose number he still had, and said, "I need to speak to Ada, please." Chioma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'll ask her." Adiz's first reaction, when Chioma told her, was a flat and immediate no. But Chioma said, "Ada, you've healed. You've grown. You're not the same person you were. Maybe hearing what he has to say isn't for him. Maybe it's the last thing you need to close that door completely." And so Adiz agreed to one phone call. It lasted almost 2 hours. Emeka did not make excuses. He did not try to rebuild what had been broken. He simply said the things that were true, in the plainest language he could find. "I was selfish. I let someone who loved me and gave me everything become invisible to me the moment I didn't need her anymore. And I have spent years living with that. I'm not calling to ask for anything. I just needed you to know that I know what I did. And that I'm sorry. Genuinely." Adiz was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I forgive you, Emeka. Not because what you did was okay, but because I refuse to carry it anymore. I have a life to live." She hung up the phone, and then she made herself a cup of tea, sat by the window of her apartment, and watched the evening light settle over a city that had no idea how hard she had worked to earn her place in it. She thought about the girl she had been, the one who sold her grandmother's earrings for a man's school fees, who hawked food on weekends and wore the same 4 dresses for a year, who believed so completely in another person that she had almost forgotten to believe in herself. She didn't feel bitter about that girl. She felt proud of her, because that girl had loved fully, had given without counting, had stayed when it was hard, and when the love was taken away, she had not collapsed into bitterness. She had turned the wound into a foundation, and built something extraordinary on top of it. As for Emeka, he found work eventually, rebuilt slowly on his own. He became more thoughtful, more careful with people. The kind of man who remembers that success without integrity is a house built on sand. But he would tell you himself if you asked him directly. The best version of his life was shaped by a woman he underestimated. And the most successful chapter of her life began the day she stopped waiting for him to recognize her value, and decided to show the world herself. There is an old truth that runs beneath stories like this one, quiet and patient as a river. It says, "What you do in the dark eventually comes into the light." It says, "Loyalty is never wasted, even when it is not returned, because it shapes the person giving it into someone capable of extraordinary things." It says, "Karma is not always loud. It does not always arrive with drama or spectacle. Sometimes karma is quiet. Sometimes it looks like a woman standing in her own commercial kitchen, wearing her own chef's coat, building something that no one can ever take away from her. And sometimes karma looks like a man sitting in a small apartment, reading a newspaper article about the woman he abandoned, and understanding too late but fully exactly what he threw away. Some people only recognize the value of water when the well runs dry. Some people only recognize the value of loyalty when it is gone. And some people, the ones like Adiz, carry a love so deep within them that even when it is rejected, even when it is taken for granted, it does not die. Transforms. It becomes fuel. It becomes the quiet fire that drives them forward, long after everyone else has given up on them. Never underestimate the person who loved you without conditions. Never mistake their patience for weakness. And never assume that because someone forgave you, they still need you. Some people were simply passing through your life to show you what grace looks like. And some people were only in your life long enough to teach you what you were capable of surviving. Adiz survived. And then she thrived. Before you go, we have 3 questions for you. Do you believe karma always finds its way back to the people who deserve it? Have you ever given everything to someone who didn't appreciate it until it was too late? And what would you have said to Emeka if you had the chance? Drop your answers in the comments section. We genuinely love reading your thoughts. And the conversations that happen in the comments on stories like this one are some of the most powerful we have ever seen. If this story moved you, touched something real in you, or reminded you of someone you know, please share it. Because somewhere out there, someone needs to hear that their sacrifice was not wasted, that their story is not over, that the best chapter is still ahead of them. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. Click the bell. Because we tell stories here that will stay with you long after the video ends. Stories about real life, real love, real consequences, and the quiet, relentless justice of time. We'll see you in the next one.